Naturalistic approaches to religion grew quickly, right? For example, Hendrik Paulus in 1761 to 1851 offered naturalistic explanations for gospel miracles, right? For instance, the healings merely befitted the ill person's nervous system. So why were they healed? Their nervous system. So it was a psychological thing, right? The dead were only suspended in animation. So they weren't really dead. They were in suspended animation. And so they were able to be raised right after their animation ran out. And the feeding of many people were merely involved setting a good example of food sharing. Right. Jesus didn't feed 5,000 people. It was just the example of you should share your food. That's what that miracle is all about, according to Paulus, right?
He was just really good at division, yes.
Yeah, that's right. So he also says that David Friedrich Strauss, again in the 1800s, explained early Christian miracle stories as myths depicted as history. So they're just myths, but they were depicted as history. He tells us, developed the 18th century emphasis on naturalistic historical explanation, using literary psychological categories to preserve the value of the text, right? So the text is important, while stripping it any unhistorical supernaturalist elements. So the text is important. We should understand that really what's going on are just myths. They're telling us stories. It's not really history.
And not quite to this extreme, but this is the work that Lydia McGrew has done, who's been on the show before, does with her responses to Michael Licona, and to a lesser degree, I think, Gary Habermas as well, of having kind of the genre literature be front and center rather than the apostles were actually expressing what they believed was true history, and they were telling true historical events, utilizing the scriptorum devices of their time, and not so much the theory that they're rearranging patterns to make a point that tells the story well or with a false purpose to it. So that comes out here. But we also see this with the Jesus Seminar, right? Which I don't think really, I think it was pretty popular in the 80s and 90s, and of course that's the 1980s and 1990s, which soon is approaching where we actually have to make that clarification. But this was the idea of Jesus didn't actually walk on the water, he walked by the water, and so it's probably just a bad translation. Yeah, because when Jesus is walking by the water, of course the disciples are in fear and awe of what Jesus is doing. No one has ever walked by the water before, especially to some fishermen. That's outrageous to see. We have this type of the cure is almost as worse as the disease itself, trying to fit that explanation, square peg round hole type deal.